Inside. Are you ready? Did you throw that up there on purpose?
She just... Careful,
darling.
darling.
Whoa.
These girls.
Yeah.
If there's an accident, they'll have it. From the country.
Yeah.
I was in Derbyshire, a place called Melbourne, and we're not country folk. My mother was a GP,
What's that?
general practitioner, doctor,
Oh,
medical
wow.
doctor.
Oh, that's interesting. Okay, let's start there. A lot of women weren't doctors back then.
Not very many of them. No.
Uh-huh.
She was in the second surge. There was a TV series. I can't remember what its name was, starring a well-known actress, and that was the first generation of women that became doctors. My mother was 8 to 10 years later.
And what do you know when she got her degree? In the 40s?
Late 30s.
Wow. And so what was it? What kind of family was her father a doctor?
Her father was an expatriate Irishman who joined the Customs and Excise in Northern Ireland.
No kidding.
In Scotland.
Scotland.
From Ireland.
Okay, so your people originally come from Ireland, partly,
Yes,
correct?
I'm a quarter Irish, quarter Scots, and half English.
Half English. And Catholic too, right?
I am, but not through the English side.
Okay.
The Irish side.
So was that ever a conflict in a family? Never?
No, my mother brought me up as a Catholic. End of story.
End of story. Did you go to Catholic school?
Yeah.
So it wasn't.
Radcliffe.
Okay. Let's start with your name and how you spell it, and just so we just have it for the record.
Okay. Well,
All
it's Ewan Simmonds, EWAN. But the fact of life is that my father was sent out to record the birth, and he was told to spell it EUAN, and he got it wrong. So I'm EWAN.
So wow.
And the second name is Simmonds, which is from his name, south of England. And we lived in Osmaston Road, Derby, for the first 5 years, and then we moved to a place called Melbourne, just short of the Leicester border, which was the home of Lord Melbourne, Queen Victoria's Prime Minister originally, and now belonged to the Lothian family.
Right. So what did your dad do?
He was a local government architect, and he travelled all over the UK. He spent most of the weeks away at work, and then he came back at the weekend.
Did your so when you were growing up, how many brothers and sisters did you have?
I have 3 sisters,
3 sisters, and
all younger.
All younger. So you were the older brother.
Yeah.
Wow. So was it a lively house that you grew up in?
It was apparently a sexist house.
A sexist?
You know what I mean.
Well, you know that's.
I was the only. Well, my father wasn't there most of the time.
And so with your mom, I mean, you must have had to have some kind of role where you were watching the kids if your mom was a general practitioner and
Well, no, that was the days when we used to have nurses,
Okay.
and the girls were looked after by a nanny, a nurse called Nanny Skidmore.
Nanny Skidmore.
Yeah.
So what year were you born?
41.
41. Okay, so one of the things that I was going to, what I found interesting originally was that, you know, my knowledge of history is that there was national service in Great Britain.
And it stopped in 1959, and I just avoided it because I was going to university.
Right.
In 59.
But was, you know, let's say when you're 17 or 18 years old, did you ever think that you would have a career in the military when you were growing up? Was this something that you envisioned?
No, I envisioned doing something with languages. I spoke French and I was learning Spanish at university, but it didn't actually happen that way. So I worked in Birmingham after I left university, and I just didn't enjoy industry, but I'd done it because my mother had asked me to go and work for a director that she knew, and I made my mind up to join the army then because I was in the TA and I thoroughly enjoyed it.
What's the TA?
Territorial Army.
Okay, so that was so it's a territorial army that's in Great Britain.
Yeah.
That's not no deployments yet or anything. That's
Well,
just
they have deployed in recent years because the army's got much smaller and the TA's been needed.
Now okay, so you studied languages. You'd mentioned that you'd gone to Dublin to study.
Yeah.
And
I applied. I didn't want to go to Oxford or Cambridge. I just didn't want to.
why not?
I don't know. I just didn't want to. You know, child has different views.
Yeah.
But I took the entrance exam, got a distinction in Latin, and was accepted. And I did my degree course in language.
What was your family's politics? Did it differ across different political lines?
No, they were mostly conservative. They voted conservative as elections.
So that's Tory, right?
Yeah, Tory.
Okay. And so one of the things that I find interesting is that in the United States is that, because you're my father and mom's age, they born 40, 42, and by the mid-60s, we had Vietnam going on here, and a lot of their parents, especially mostly the fathers who had been in the service in World War II, a lot of them didn't want their kids to go into the military. And but that's neither here nor there. And a lot of them did, and some of them didn't. There was also a draft. Was your father in the service?
No, he was in the army during the war. He was a Royal Engineer.
And did he go to?
He went out. He started in India and he finished in Burma. But apparently he was injured during the conflict. I found out much later, and he came back to the UK in about 1944.
Oh wow! So he was injured because that was the Pacific Theater.
Yeah.
So did you grow up hearing anything about the military? Was it something?
He never talked about it.
He never talked about it. Did you have? Did any of your grandfathers serve in World War I? Or
my grandfather served as a private soldier in the. I think it might have been the Berkshire Regiment actually, because he was a Berkshire boy, and he survived the war.
In France. Wow. Okay, so the reason why I brought that up about the popularity of the military, what was the mood, among, let's say, teenagers after national service when you didn't have to go? Was this something that were your views conservative as well?
I don't think conservatives got very much to do with it, to be honest with you. It's just a personal reaction, and my reaction came, if you like, relatively late in life. I was in my 20s. And it was my what I did in the Territorial Army that made me think, well, I've got a career. And I had a friend, childhood friend, who was in the army on a short service commission, and he did his 3 years or 4 years as they were then, and he came out and we spent time together, and I decided to join the army. End of story.
So okay, let's start with training. When you're inducted, is that the correct term? Like when you're here?
Well, unusually, I was atypical of my time. I was a university graduate,
right,
and I hadn't gone to Sandhurst or Mons, and they accepted me into the RCT on what's called a probationary commission. 14th of January 1966, and they told me they'd accepted me, and then I joined the first junior officers course for training in the RCT.
Where was that?
Aldershot.
In Bordershire. And so did that include, I guess the equivalent here would be boot camp. Did you have to go through a physical training where you're learning the order or the drills and the...
Yes, but not so much the drills, because that had all happened for the other officers at Sandhurst, and I'd been in the TA, so they knew I'd done various things. No, it was more the technical stuff. It was the skills about the Royal Corps of Transport, the vehicles, the bicycles, the Land Rovers. It was the I'm trying to find the right word. It was the trade skills, if you like, of the career they were going to be following.
So the Territorial Army, that was prior to your probationary commission?
Yes.
Okay.
I was in an infantry regiment as what they called a potential officer cadet. I was a private soldier on private's money.
In the TA?
Privileges of the officers' mess.
Okay, well, let's talk about you getting to the Territorial Army first, and what was that like? You just got out of university, correct?
Yeah.
And
I
so
went to work in Birmingham.
And okay.
And I just liked the idea, and I asked if I could join, and they said yes. And I used to go every Tuesday night, I think it was.
What was the state of the British Army at that time?
Oh, it was quite full. There was quite a lot of people. Even, it was near enough to the end of the war to be still worried about army things.
Yeah.
And gradually, politics took over, and time took over, and our, if you like, military requirements reduced naturally, and they began to reduce the size of the army. But they still wanted an army, as you would expect. And I was just part of that TA side, and then when I applied to join, they accepted me for trial period. But I didn't go to Mons or Sandhurst.
What was the significance of Mons or Sandhurst?
Well, I suppose it teaches you the basics of soldiering and being a young officer, which I'd done in the TA, if you like. But I never really thought much about it. It was.
Did you take when you join the TA, what's the typical trajectory or route when you first go in? You sign up, and are you just sent to a basic training?
No, well, they have bases throughout the country, and I happened to be in Birmingham.
Oh, Birmingham, okay.
And in central Birmingham, there was C Company, I think it was, of the Warwickshire Fusiliers. And that's the company I joined. And there was a major who was an OC, TA, and they paraded every Tuesday night. That was the Tuesday, it was training night, if you like. And we went on annual camp, and I went on annual camps with them, in Catterick on one occasion. And I remember sleeping on what they called palliasses, not mattresses as such. They were just, if you like, boxes of particular material filled with straw, and that was it. That's just by one memory, but it was quite painless. It was, if you're right.
What about taking orders from people and getting yelled at from the word go?
Well, I accepted the fact that I would be a junior officer, or in my case in the TA, a private soldier with officer privileges, but I just, if you like, took it on the chin. A Lance Corporal could tell me what to do, if you like, because I was a private soldier with privileges of the officers' mess. It's a very strange environment, actually.
How so?
But I still enjoyed it. I mean, it was all part of the training.
Right.
You know, and it was training with basic soldiers like me that just filled, if you like, my knowledge base, because they were the people. They may have been TA, but they were real people, and they were TA in a minor capacity.
Did you make friends with people in the TA that lasted for a while, or was this sort of a time?
It lasted for a while, but obviously as I grew up and grew away,
yeah.
You know, there was that. Because those were not the great days of what we do now. You know, you can pick up your phone and ring someone in Finland and say, "Hello, Jack, how are you?"
Right.
No, you had to pick up the phone, and it cost a lot of money, and there was no mobile phones or anything. So.
Right, and that's what we were talking about in there. You know, you can't just pick up and call a relative or something like that. But
it's unbelievable.
There's stereotypes in any kind of situation. Did you run across like the interesting, this is in the early days when you were training, like the career soldier, the guys who were, the sergeant majors, or the guys who were drilling?
I only met those after I left the TA and was accepted for the regular army on a probationary commission. I lived in Buller Barracks, Aldershot, so I met my brother officers who were, up to lieutenant colonel and down to the second lieutenant, and I met some of the soldiers, but I didn't meet a lot of soldiers because I was in the officers' mess.
Right.
It was strange, actually. It was the days of the Batman, the man who looked after the officers in the officers' mess.
What? Explain that, because I always hear about it. It's sort of like a manservant of sorts, right? Or
his name was Arthur Hailstone. I mean, that's certainly about that. He was a lovely man. Very humble man, and I just got on like a house on fire with him.
He's the Batman.
Yeah.
Okay.
They brought me tea in the morning. They woke you up, and it was unbelievable, really, because I could wake myself up quite safely. And it used to embarrass me that he was doing things that I did myself.
Was he an older guy?
Oh yes, he was in his 40s.
Oh wow!
Oh, he'd been in the war.
No kidding.
Yeah, Private Arthur Hailstone. But the interesting thing was, although Batman gradually died out, I was the last officer ever to stay, or probationary officer ever to stay in Buller Barracks officers' mess, because they were moving from there to a place called Church Crookham because they were rebuilding and refinancing and everything else. And I was left in the officers' mess on my own with my Batman Arthur, because they wanted to make sure that the oak panels in the dining room were not nicked while there was no one there. So I spent that
That's a job.
few days, yes. And then they came and took all the oak panelling down and took it away because the building was going to be
So this guy's you're Batman's a 40-something guy who'd been in World War. Were his mannerisms that of like an old-fashioned Batman?
No, not at all.
Right.
He was just a normal guy, and he knew what his job was, and he knew it very well. And I knew what his job was because he told me what it was, and we just got on.
What would he
But
call
I
you,
did-
like
I never
Lieutenant Simmons or something, or what was your rank at the time? Was it?
I was an officer cadet.
Okay, so officer cadet.
Or sorry, probationary second lieutenant. I beg your pardon. Probationary second lieutenant. So I was given the privileges of an officer's mess.
Yes.
Which meant I had a Batman. Which is all not silly, but it doesn't happen now. Put it that way. And
Does that rank still exist? Or that sort of that job of Batman? Does that name? So it does not exist in the.
Not as far as I know. I think it was removed after I got married. So I was never in the officer's mess again unless I was on duty. But they did have staff who wake you up, this sort of thing. But you didn't have someone to look after you any longer.
So how long is a probationary commission last until the?
In my case,
Yes.
it was 6 months.
Okay, is that typical?
No,
No.
because it's not normal.
What wasn't normal?
It wasn't normal practice because the normal officer recruitment was through Mons or Santos.
Gotcha. Wow.
I'd asked if I could join the army from university, having spoken languages, and they said yes.
It's almost like a doctor getting a commission like that into the service, without having to go. Did you feel as though that you had to be brought up to speed to the guys who had been in Mons?
Well, no, I was quite observant, so I was observant of what was going on around me. So I was working with in a particular area of the barracks with a young subaltern, a lieutenant. So we used to talk about things. So I was learning all about it all the time, but there was no, if you like, formal training. The formal training was as a young officer when I went on to the junior officers course in September of that year.
So that's 6 months after your probation.
Yeah.
And then, how are you judged to be actually with the probationary becomes? Are there people who wash out who don't get through the probationary period?
No. At the end of my residential period, if you like, at Buller Barracks on a probationary commission, which in fact was about 8 months. I arrived in January and I left in September to join the junior officers course. So, what are we? 8 months, 8.5 months. They accepted my application and said you can now join the the junior officers course, which I joined.
And that's what you wanted to do.
And that's when I got my commission.
And so you get your commission. Are you still a single guy at this time, or are you?
Yes,
okay.
very much. Yeah.
And so you hadn't met Phil's mom yet. So what? You get that you report in September or October.
I joined the junior officers course that spent its first few weeks at Buller Barracks.
And take me through that. Like, what was that like?
I don't actually remember an awful lot about it, but you spent quite a lot of time in classrooms learning about the basics, which was motorcycles, Land Rovers, 4-tonners, tank transporters, and learning about
their mechanics, or there's
mechanics, how you service them, how you maintained them, how you were expected to control the behaviour on the road in public, if you like. It was very much, if you like, a technical training. And
Sure.
But it's rather like teaching a child to drive,
Yeah.
sort of thing.
Were you into cars as a kid? Did you have any kind of? I know that car culture among teenagers might not have been the same in England.
No.
So this was just a random posting that they sent you here, and there was a need for people.
We went down to what was called the Army School of Transport. I can't remember the name.
That's okay.
It's quite a long time ago.
Was it easy for you? Did you take?
I reacted very quickly. It was I just filled in, and once they realised who I was, they accepted me. I hadn't gone through Santos, okay, so
Right.
if you like, I didn't have all the formal drills, but I knew how to do it.
Were any of them envious? Like, I wish I would have done that. No.
Not really. They'd all done Santos out of choice.
Wow. Where is Santos in Mons located?
Mons is near Aldershot, and Santos is near Frimley in Hampshire.
Yeah. So okay, so you're learning all of these technical skills and learning about automobiles of all kinds. Are you ever, when you become an officer, no matter what, you do serve in some kind of administrative capacity? Are you? Do you know how to give orders yet to people?
On the junior officers course, you are basically under the supervision, if you like, of senior NCOs, senior non-commissioned officers, and officers, obviously. But the basic trainers are senior non-commissioned officers. They've been through it, they're experts at their job, and that's their main responsibility. Whereas the officer's responsibility, if you like, take it a step further, is to look after the senior ranks and the middle ranks and the junior ranks. So they're the technical people, and you're much more the supervisor. But in order to be able to supervise properly, you've got to know about all the techniques.
Yeah.
So that's really what you learn on the officers course.
So if you were to advise any young 20, 21-year-old who's about to get a commission in the military, and you have to deal with NCOs and guys who'd been in for a long time, would your advice be just to shut your mouth and listen as much as you possibly can?
My advice actually was, and would be if it happened again, would be listen to what's being said to you and don't get too officious with the senior ranks that you're dealing with, because they know a lot more than you do about what you're about to do. But accept the fact that you are a commissioned officer and they are non-commissioned officers, so you have that superiority of rank over them. But treat them like real people, don't treat them like animals.
Have you seen them treated badly before?
I have, yes.
And did you see that early on in your...
Quite early on, and I had words with one of my senior officers, and I said, I'm puzzled about that, sir. That's not what I've been taught. Anyway, I think something may have happened about it, but I don't know.
What do you think? What do you think that is? Just someone feeling a little
bullshit.
Yeah. So,
and I'm a commissioned officer, and you're not. So do what you bloody well told. That's not the way to treat them. If you like it, you treat them not as equals. But you treat them as technical experts, and only when right, James, Staff James, please, tomorrow we need to go and do this. So you're given an order by your OC, so you tell your senior ranks, this is what we're going to do.
Right.
But you don't order them how to do it. You say, this is what we're going to do, and I'll leave it in your hands.
Even today, I see abuses of power in all kinds of work scenarios, and if it's successful or not, if you're trying to engender loyalty among the people that you're working with.
No, I mean we all learn wisdom in different ways. Maybe because I'd come from a middle class background with a doctor and architect as parents.
Which you did.
I learnt to treat people in what I call a normal way.
Yeah.
That other people may not have done that, because they might have come from the working class. I don't mean that in any unkind way, but you just treat people in a different way if you're middle class. Does that make sense?
Absolutely. Yeah.
And I always accepted the skills that those people had that was greater than my skills. But I also realised occasionally I had to give them an order, which was, look, we've got to get this sorted out. Can you do it by Thursday, sort of thing. So it was a balancing of situations and a balancing of rank, basically.
So at what point, this is the junior officer's course, and when you make it, how long does that take, and until your first real assignment?
I think from memory it was 6 months.
6 months.
Yeah, it was September through to end of March, and I got my first posting, and I remember arriving in the place where it was on the 1st of April, which to America is just as well known as it is in England, April Fool's Day.
Yeah. What do they call it there, All Fools?
No, April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
They just call it April Fool's Day.
Yeah.
That was the day I landed.
Oh, wow. So, where is your first assignment? And did your training prior to that prepare you for what you were going to do?
Well, if you think about it, on a technical basis, the technical training covers you wherever you go. Where you're sent is really in the minds of the posting authority, and I suspect I was sent where I was because I was marginally older than all the young people who'd come through Santos, because I'd been through university.
Right.
But I was given my first task in Aden, where I joined on April the 1st.
So what do you do? What's your first job?
Well,
And this is what, 1967?
I had a troop, a very small troop. I only had 5 soldiers and a senior rank, because what we did was we controlled the sullage vehicles, which is basically removal of rubbish from cisterns and what have you. But it was a necessary function with him. And that's how I learnt. I didn't go out an awful lot to start with, but I accompanied my senior ranks and juniors sometimes when they were off on a task that was within range, within compass, and it wasn't a dangerous place to go. So, sewage removal from cisterns, what a career start.
Yeah, and do they tell you that on April 1st?
No,
It's a joke.
What they did on April the 1st was they took you into the officers' mess when you arrived. And there were 3 of us that arrived that week. One from my corps, RCT, and 2 others who arrived on the same plane. But they tried to interrogate us in the officers' mess, and they wanted to know all about our sex lives. And
Who did?
I, being the man I was, said,
Isn't
my
these-
sex life, if it existed, is my own business, not yours. So please stop asking me these stupid questions.
Were these
But
men
that
that
was
you-
very much my view.
Yeah,
But the others were taken in because they were junior officers.
no kidding. Wow.
So they tell them all about their sex lives. And I said, I'm not telling you anything then.
Well, doesn't that sort of connotes a certain casualness that you don't want to be coming from you?
Yes.
Right.
But I mean, that's one of the not one of the first tricks of the trade. But then you realise that it's a big con, basically a big con trick. But it has the advantage of the more experienced officer taking advantage of the arrivals of a new, inexperienced officer. But I have to say, I said, I'm not telling you, and it's none of your business. I don't care what you say.
Wow.
And I said to myself, if there's anything behind it, then they'll deal with me disciplinarily.
Right.
And they didn't, because it was wrong. They shouldn't have done it.
That's
Anyway,
interesting.
That was life.
Were you proud to be, once you were given the commission, did you feel a certain sense of pride that you were now a British officer?
Yes, I did. Even though I was only because I'd gone through that system of probation and commission, I was made a lieutenant 18 months after I joined as a probation and commission. So I was promoted to lieutenant before my fellow junior officers were, because one at my age and 2 the length of time I'd been within the army.
Well, what's the rank below? Isn't the lieutenant?
Second lieutenant is.
Okay, so
And
second
that's
lieutenant.
normally for 18 months, and then procedurally you become a subaltern, a senior subaltern, a lieutenant. It's 18 months.
How did you take to marching in the beginning? Marching in parade, was it easy?
Quite used to it.
Wow.
Quite used to it. Because I didn't mention. Sorry, I was in the Scouts. Then I was in the TA. I was in the cadet force at school, so I was quite used to marching.
Okay, so it was old hat by that time, right? So you how long are you doing the sewage until you start? How long are you doing the sewage?
That's quite right.
Yeah, like how long are you doing the sewage, and then where do you go from there? Let's just
Well, basically, it's all to do with postings.
Yeah.
I wrote down some things last night trying to
good.
cover my career, but trying to remember. I don't remember everything, believe it or not.
No, but it's
because
just
35 years.
Yeah, it's not.
No,
Just whatever recollections or
what
what
you possibly need to know is that I was in Aden when the revolution started.
in Northern Ireland.
No, in Aden.
Oh, in Aden.
Yeah, Aden.
Okay.
That's
Oh
where I
wow.
was.
No kidding.
And there were 8 RCT soldiers killed, having come off the ranges, right opposite the main police post.
Oh, I know exactly where that was because I watched a documentary. They were ambushed, wasn't it?
Yes, they were.
Wow.
And there were 2 vehicles on that. One of them was owned by my troop.
No kidding.
So I had an interest. And just recently, a year ago, in March 17, I persuaded the Corps, or the association, to celebrate 50 years after the event.
No kidding.
Because I was actually there. I was no longer RCT, I'd changed, but we'll come into that in a minute.
Mm-hmm.
And they had a talk in Salisbury from the local branch by the young subaltern who'd been the troop commander of the troop that was on the beach doing it. They were just doing range practice.
Right.
Quite harmless.
How many? 5, you said?
8.
There were 8.
But what I didn't know until the night of this talk in Salisbury was he was also the subaltern who'd been on board the vehicle where the 8 soldiers were killed.
Oh.
He had somehow survived. He was on the same vehicle as all the 8 soldiers.
Wow.
And I didn't know that, so that was a real teller to me.
So, and when did you find this out? This was...
Last March when we had the
wow.
talk.
No kidding. And how long...
But I'd known him for ages.
But he never... When did he finally reveal that he was on...
On this talk.
No kidding.
Yeah.
Was he emotional? Was he...
Well, he was a bit taken aback, yes. He spoke with a rather broken voice and he's halted here and there. So I had not realised when I suggested we remember the day that the talk would be given by a young man who'd actually physically, like me, been there.
Wow.
I mean, I didn't know he'd been there. So for me, it was revelatory.
So this is like 69, 68 when this...
67.
67, okay, so
March
yeah.
16th, 17th, 67.
And so this is in Aden, wow. And what was the mood, because obviously, how big was the base that you were operating out of?
Oh, it's quite large, quite large barracks with about 8 units, 7 or 8 units in it. 2 RCT units, an engineer unit, a pioneer unit. So it was quite a large base. And before that, it had been a normal place, a foreign posting. But then they had this revolution. Crater, you've heard of Crater?
No.
No. Well, Crater was the city that was upstaged and the army went in.
Do you remember how you felt when you heard about this happening?
Yes, I did. I felt absolutely shaken to the core. There's no other word I can use. And I wondered what I could do. And apart from recovering the vehicles, getting the soldiers to hospital where they actually all died. They were all civilians and they died because they were fatal injuries.
Sure.
Was the day I gave blood in Aden, and I've still got the actual chit to show it.
No kidding.
Yeah, it's things like that you remember.
Absolutely. Did you arrive on the scene post attack, obviously, to retrieve your?
No. Oh no. There they brought the infantry were sent out to escort them back into camp, and they came into our what they call Normandy lines.
And so, how long were you there before this happened? And was there a considerable difference afterwards? Let's say,
May. Sorry, it wasn't March. It was May the 17th.
Okay, May 17th.
Yeah,
that's my daughter's birthday.
I arrived in April, so it was fairly close after
wow.
1st of April.
Oh, that's it. Okay. So you're there about a month, or a little less than a month.
6 weeks.
And where did it shook you to the core? But obviously, did it impact others as well?
Yes, it shook everybody if you think about it, because you don't expect on peacetime duties.
Yes.
Yeah. Regular army soldiers to be shot at by the civil police force of a resident country.
Yeah.
So that's what started the revolution and the infantry going into Crater. But another small story about that is that I shared a room with a chap called Tony Clements, who was a subaltern in the engineers, and he'd gone into Crater with the mine clearing troop, his own people, before the infantry battalion went in. No mention was ever made of what he had done to clear the way for the infantry battalion to walk into Crater. His name was never mentioned.
And what was the mood like in Crater after this among the people that lived there? And
well, Crater was actually a normal residential area for the civil Aden population. But it was a nasty place because that's where several infantry soldiers were killed.
Wow.
But the other thing that I also remember, the army always talked about 2 terrorist movements or rebellious movements. One was Flossie, Federation for the Liberation of South Yemen, and the other name I can't remember just at the moment, but they were supposed to be the strong revolution force in Aden. And gradually it was the British Army moved out, which they did shortly after, because I was sent to Sharjah with my troop, with my company.
Where is Aden specifically? Like, if you were to describe it on a map.
Right at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula. Suez Canal coming down, but right at the bottom.
Wow.
Yeah. And yes, the British Army got their intelligence wrong, in my view, because shortly after the revolt had occurred and a new government had been elected, Flossie was wiped out by the National Liberation NLF, National Liberation Front.
Okay.
And Flossie did not take over as anticipated. Flossie were wiped out by the NLF. That's nothing to do with the army or the politics, but it was just a fact of life.
Well, there were various hotspots in the world that the British Army was posted to. What were some of them? Obviously, later on Ireland, right? And then
that was basic. They were basically the only places, in my experience. Yes, there were other events, but I was not part of them. Are you with me? In Africa, I was at headquarters.
What was that like, getting to Africa for the first time? Had you done much traveling anyway as a kid?
As a child, no. It was, holidaying with mummy and daddy at different places in England, from south east to west. No, I did my basic first travels, apart from going to university in Ireland.
Yes.
Which meant a move every term, in and out, which is quite.
Did you like going to college there?
I loved it. Yeah.
Wow.
Yeah. But all my foreign postings were, if you like, normal places where the British Army had representation for political reasons. Must be, yeah. But
so you're at the bottom of the Arabian Peninsula here.
Yeah.
One of the things I was going to ask you was, I think that you'd mentioned, I said, were there the usual cast of characters? And you said not until I got into the junior officer course. I mean, you mentioned the Batman early on, but had you met fellow officers or even NCOs that had made long careers in the Army?
Well, there were commissioned NCOs, but I didn't meet any of them in the first part of my career in the Army. We were all youngish people, young 20, 25-year-olds. The subalterns with their commanding officers or officers commanding. Officer commanded a squadron, commanding officer commanded a battalion. OC, CO. That's how we differentiated.
Isn't it interesting, though? I always say, okay, when my parents graduated from college, and let's say between 62 and 64, in America as well as England, the counterculture really didn't start until the last half. And here you are walking around did you wear your uniform when you weren't on base, or when you went into town? Did you notice like a significant cultural shift in the?
I'm just thinking about that, and I think that as a matter of course, because you were representing Her Majesty the Queen, you wore your uniform at all times outside barracks.
Okay.
Inside barracks, you could have civilian parties.
Sure.
And you'd civil. I never remember going outside barracks without my uniform on. Now, other people might have done that, but
Did you have a beard then?
No, you weren't allowed them.
No kidding. Wow. And all your hair always short?
Yes, it always has been. Yeah.
Wow. So what? So you never were harassed or anything by, let's say, a bunch of obnoxious kids or having a go at you? Or something?
I expected that question, and the answer is actually no, because even though we were, if you like, in Aden, in a state of revolt or revolution or rebellion, the fact that you were, occupation is not the right word, that you were on duty in their country.
Sure.
There was a kind of dignity attached there too, and they accepted that you were there.
But what about back in Britain when you were first in? And let's say,
right. Out of barracks, you wore civilian clothes.
Oh, okay, so you were all. That's probably what I meant, but but I got a different, better answer. So okay, so after how long were you in Aden for when this? Because I had never heard. I heard of the revolution, but I was thinking about something else about the soldiers getting ambushed. And what do you remember? What outfits or what kind of units these guys were from? Was it just kind of?
Well, what caused a bit of a ruction, if you like, within our own Royal Corps of Transport, as it was then.
Royal Corps Transport.
Now it's part of another title, RLC.
Yeah.
It became Royal Logistic Corps, which formed up of several former types of units, but that's just history. Just remind me, what were you doing? RLC. Let me stop there for a second.
Okay.
Sorry,
Yeah,
I've just lost track of my thought process. You asked me a question.
I asked you about the people that were, if they were in your, what outfits the guys who were killed from.
Oh right, yes, that's right. They were Royal Corps of Transport.
Okay.
Ordinary soldiers.
That was your branch.
Yes.
Okay.
My corps. Out on normal training duties by firing the rifles at targets on the beach.
Mm-hmm. Something that you would have. That's a routine. You went through that.
I would have done that.
Did you have to qualify on various kinds of weapons and?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes. Pistol, SMG as it was in those days. Mm-hmm. Self-loading rifle, SLR.
Were you a good shot?
Actually, apropos, yes, I was. I was an army champion.
Oh, really?
In the pistol. Years later.
Wow.
Corps 30 it was.
So you knew none of these men. They weren't directly under your command. But still, you feel a...
No, I felt absolute horror, dejection. And the initial thought was, what the hell can I do to help? You can't do anything to help a dead man.
Yeah.
But how can I help the system? And they sent out a request for blood in that first phase. And I went and gave my blood. I'd given it before at university, so I was a rare kind of blood which could have been given to anyone. I was O rhesus negative. I'm an SLM, but I can't give blood anymore because of my age.
Yes.
And the quality of the blood I produce is not acceptable within the system. That was something that I found out about 4 years ago.
That's interesting.
But they accepted the blood, and it could have been given to any one of those soldiers, are you with me? On a short-term basis. O rhesus negative, anyone can take quite safely. So in a way, I was in a beneficial situation at that time.
Was there, beyond giving blood, did you feel an extra threat or an extra sense of danger?
Yes, we did. Thereafter, we always went out on our jobs with at least 2 armed escorts. Certainly that was our policy.
Yeah.
And this is true, this is a personal revelation. After this business happened, we were asked to go out to Marla, to the Para camp, because they were stationed in Aden at the time, to clear their toilets with our silage vehicles.
Yeah.
And I was driving along the Marla Strait before we went up into the hill, and a shot was fired at us. Now I've never forgotten that. We had both windows open, and the shot came from the side of the vehicle, and it came through the driving area and out the other side.
Wow.
There was no marks on the rifle because both windows were down.
So you were shot at?
We were shot at once, and I decided to do something about that.
Yeah.
When I came back out of town, because we were a silage vehicle.
Like, who would want to shoot at us?
Yeah, well, that was rather our thoughts, but. I said to my soldier, okay, just loosen the hold a bit. So as we drive along the street, we'll give them a bit of English silage. No, joking apart, I thought it was a fair return for having shot at me.
Yeah.
And that was my decision, no one else's.
Right.
But thereafter, we were never shot at.
Wow.
Because they didn't like sewage on their streets.
No.
Even if it was accidental.
Yeah.
As it was.
So you put a stop to it.
Yeah. No, but I just thought that was my response. And that's not an army secret or anything. It's just how I felt, and we weren't endangering anyone's life. We were just making them rue the fact that they shot at us.
So was this a Muslim population that
basically?
So would you hear the call to prayer on loudspeakers like they wouldn't?
Yes.
Wow.
Yeah.
So that's a nice indicator that you're in a new country and you. And was the weather any hotter than usual?
Oh, it was very hot.
Right.
It was terrific.
Did you have shorts? Were you allowed to wear shorts?
We wore shorts most of the time, yes.
Okay.
Unless we were in formal parade uniform, and we might be asked to wear long trousers.
Were you there? So how long were you there? Was it during like any holidays, like Christmas or?
No, because of the Aden decision, you may not remember, but the Foreign Secretary at the time, George Brown, said in Parliament, and they should never have done this, we will be leaving Aden. So the army had to sort itself out.
Yeah.
And I went to Sharjah in October '67. Sharjah was further up the coast, right at the north end, if you like, of the Arabian Peninsula. Sharjah and Dubai, yeah?
Yeah.
Where all the buildings now going on.
Was there ever a change in, because you think about what these areas were like then and how they are now, and you had the '67 war happening just for 6 days in Israel.
Whatever. Yeah.
Right. Was there did you notice any kind of change in radicalism that might have been going on, not among Brits, but just in the local populations?
Oh, you mean because of what happened in
Israel?
Israel, would there have been a failure?
You wouldn't have known.
Well, again, going back to my earlier point about this business about communication.
Yeah.
The methods of communication earlier on, yes, they could do it by radio or by phone, but things took a lot longer to happen, sort of thing.
Yeah.
So I suspect, although information may have been fed back, we never had the complete picture. And I don't think it radicalised particularly anyone where I was, Aden or Sharjah.
What did you think of the to be in that part of the world? And you would hear these, obviously you were interested in languages. Were you interested in other cultures as well? It's like to see the.
Well, I always was. I was always very open-minded. I always have been.
Because I love Arabic music.
Yes, but I never had the time to learn Arabic because I was too busy joking about.
Yeah.
You need to study it.
Sure.
I was never in a position to be able to study it.
So you were part of the actual dismantling of the bases in Aden and getting all the.
Yeah.
So that's
I was involved. We were sent one day. Our vehicles. I think. Most of them were left behind because of the speed with which we had to get to Sharjah.
Right.
So we ended up.
How far was that away?
Sharjah, or the other side of the Arabian Peninsula.
Wow.
If Pippa's got a map, I'll show you.
Okay.
But little things mean a lot, sort of thing, to the soldiers. So they had a big colony of birds within their barrack area. They were pets, if you like, which they fed.
Yeah. Birds.
And we asked if we could take them to Sharjah with us. And they said yes. So they put this huge container of birds on a Beverley transport aircraft.
Wow.
God knows how the birds felt. And they flew them up to Sharjah with a number of soldiers.
I'm going to be talking to some birds later on.
No, but it was just, well, not peculiar to the British, but it was important to them.
Yeah.
They had a
Yeah.
grounding in we've got these birds to look after, we can't just leave them.
Wow.
So we took them to Sharjah, and they settled in Sharjah quite normally. But they were within a cage.
Did you have a pet bird amongst the others?
No, not particularly. They belonged to the soldiers, but I
Okay.
always went around and have a look at them.
Oh, that's cute. That's really cool. Yeah. But what I told you a couple of weeks when you came, I was like, I'm as interested in some, because everybody has a function, and here you're in the RCT, and you're involved in breaking. I mean, are there logistical nightmares, or are there things that go well? Is it like, have you had to deal with certain things?
Well, I'm only able to deal with something within my compass.
Exactly. That's what I want to know.
And in a way, because we had these 5 sullage vehicles, we were an integral part of society. I know it may sound daft.
Absolutely.
In military Aden.
Uh-huh.
And one night we were asked to go down to the headquarters pitch, where they had a cricket pitch, because it was being flooded by a blocked sewage pipe. And the sewage pipe had been blocked by local guerrillas.
Oh, really?
Yeah.
Wow.
And we went down into the pit and we cleared it. And about Driver Griffiths, I've never forgotten it, one of my men, and I.
Private
Just-
Griffiths.
Well, he was a private, but he was the rank in
Okay.
the RTT was driver.
Okay, Driver
Griffiths.
Yeah.
And we did it at about 3 o'clock in the morning, and we cleared the pitch for the next day, and the GOC just rang the OC. I didn't have a CO, I had an OC there, Officer Commanding Major, just to thank him for
Yeah.
the service that.
So was this like a long tube that you would suck all the stuff into?
Yeah, and well, you did it both ends. You did it one end to
Yeah.
push and the other end to pull.
Wow. And you were getting your hands dirty with this stuff.
Absolutely.
You.
Oh,
Wow.
yes. Yeah.
So this is. There
I
was,
mean, again, you see, maybe that's part of my upbringing, but
Yes.
I always used to say, you can't ask someone to do something that you can't do yourself.
wow.
So I helped him. I mean, that was my function,
Yeah.
as I saw it.
Was this an old outfit that you were with, or was this something that they just sort of created when you know?
No, that was the function, to clear all the silage areas. Yeah. And I thought,
Like the 3's 22nd
Here
Sullage.
a university graduate with speaks language ending up clearing someone's cesspit, but there you go.
Hey, but that's like it's sort of like the
It brings you down
the
to
bedrock of the rest
yeah.
of your career. So
Yeah.
how long are you doing that for, and then what happened? Where do you go from Aden and
Well, we went up to Sharjah as soldiers, and the interesting thing about Sharjah, 3 little points, personal ones, not military ones.
Sure.
We were asked to go out into the desert with all our vehicles to see how they fared in the desert.
Sure.
And one thing that they all had to have was a different sort of wheel or tyre structure. And we had one vehicle that was a ration carrier. It carried cold meals, cold drinks,
Yeah.
and it was heavy.
Is it
And
refrigerated?
it was a refrigerated lorry.
Wow.
And we thought, and it worked all the way. But we went out into the desert
Yeah.
one night, and we spent the night in the desert. And I've never forgotten it. I slept in the back of a Land Rover with my feet sticking out the back gate. And I woke up in the morning, my feet were frozen.
Oh my God! Right. It gets cold in the desert.
Absolutely. And so we sat out in the sun with our feet in the sun as the sun rose.
Oh my gosh!
So that's just one thing I remember.
Yeah.
And there was one other thing military, one other thing civilian. Was Christmas Day, we had a day off, if you like, and we went down to the beach with our packed lunches, and there was a stream leading down from inside Dubai out into the sea, and you could cross it walking along the beach. And one of my soldiers was crossing it, and he collapsed. And what we found out was a stingray was resting inside
Oh my
this.
gosh!
No, genuine,
Yeah.
quite true. One of life's experiences.
Yeah.
And as he walked across it, it
Stung him.
went out into the sea.
Oh.
So he fell off it, but he wasn't stung.
Oh, so he was
But it was an
conscious.
experience.
Wow.
If you imagine carried by a stingray for a couple of feet
No.
before you lost your balance.
Was it beautiful there?
It was beautiful. And we got a couple of photographs of it just as it was going out.
Yeah.
But and the last thing was I happen to be a Catholic. I don't know whether you know that, but
I do. That's why I was interested in stuff like the Northern Ireland thing.
Oh, right.
And
Okay.
yeah.
was the Sheikh of Sharjah had in his munificence actually allowed, he was an Italian priest, to build a church on his Sheikh's land, just on the other side of the road, outside Dubai.
Wow.
Outside Sharjah, sorry.
That's interesting.
And it was being finished as I got there, so a few of my men and I used to go and help. But we went out there on Sunday to go to church. But it was just the memory that the Sheikh
Yeah.
had allowed us to build it. And the Catholic Church happened to be the Christian focal centre for that part of the world. Just a small story.
It's
I mean, God knows what it's like now.
it's a small story, but it says a lot about the Sheikh and at that
Actually,
time period.
It does, yes, and I've never forgotten that.
Yes. And in Dubai remains a place that I think has a different kind of
Yes.
I guess on the spectrum of extremism and
Yeah.
it's the people, it's not the same as if you're in
No,
Damascus.
we were made very welcome there, actually. And there was one or two fairly important English companies that were out there. And I can't remember the name of the one, but they run a Sharjah rugby team based on this company. And I ran an army rugby team in the barracks, and we had a match.
So you were a rugby guy growing up?
Oh, absolutely.
Okay, so that was your thing. It wasn't like, did you have a specific football team that you grew up? You were a
I
rugby
was
guy.
supported Derby County.
For football?
Yes. And,
Right.
and the weekend of our Jenny's and mine delayed break after our marriage on a honeymoon. Derby County played the last two matches that won them the league in 1974.
Oh, wow.
And we got the information by paper 24 hours later. But that's what it's a little thing in life, you know.
No, it's, so you're still a single guy after
I was
the first.
single until 1974.
Okay, so that's okay. So you and then where's your next posting after the Arabian Peninsula?
I came back to join the tank transporter squadron. In
So you're out of
Retford.
sewage by then. You're out of sewage.
Yeah,
But that's
I've
fascinating.
never forgotten it. Then I was in tank transporters. Now, one thing about that was a tank transporter in itself is a heavy vehicle, and when it's carrying a tank, it's even heavier.
Sure.
And one of the things we had to do, or I had to do, because we were working in the Midlands to start with, then we moved down south to a place called Bulford, and the best way to get into South Wales was to cross the Severn Bridge, which had just been built. And I had to check with the police, is it okay to take 20 vehicles each weighing X tons?
How many tanks per vehicle?
20.
Wow. So this is
20 tank transporters.
Do they take up the whole road? It must.
Well, they could take up the whole bridge,
Wow.
because they don't travel like that.
Yeah,
They travel
yeah,
like
yeah.
that. You know,
It's kind of wide.
50, 60 metres apart, at least, sometimes 100 metres apart. But the interesting thing I had was my Land Rover broke down halfway across the bridge. It's a genuine breakdown. So I had to call in the support to get help. But I was standing on this bridge,
Holding up
a normal
traffic.
day,
Right.
and I could feel the bridge swaying, and it
Oh,
moved
wow.
about a foot, and right in the middle of the bridge. And it was quite an eerie experience.
It was probably just near capacity, if not. Over that.
But it was for the police and the local community. It was actually an interesting experience. Not to test the bridge, but to confirm that the bridge could do it. But we had to be X meters apart. You couldn't pack 20 tank transporters each weighing God knows how many, 70 tons,
So
140 tons in the middle of the bridge. So it was a journey across the bridge.
So this was your next posting.
Yeah.
Was there much of a learning curve, or once you're in transportation and once you're
Well, if you the training covered everything.
yes,
But you might go and do salvage or general transport or
Yeah.
tank transporting. So when I got to tank transporting, I had to pick up bits and pieces, but the people I used were my staff sergeant and sergeant,
yeah,
the experts. So we always had a very close working relationship.
and did they obviously prepare you for? I mean, this you could be doing this in a time of war, and
You could have been, but in fact we didn't.
right,
What we used to do was we went into Wales to go to the ranges at Castle Martin to have firing practice.
yeah.
So in a way I was involved in what they did for war,
sure.
but I wasn't involved in war as such.
Oh, I understand, but what in the training, I'm sure that you go on maneuvers and you have to.
Oh, absolutely,
I mean,
yeah.
there is a certain seriousness.
Oh,
I mean,
yes.
I have a friend who was in the military in peacetime, and he still suffers from PTSD because there's some very intense. You're operating in sort of obviously in a military capacity, but there's nothing more serious. Like
No, I mean, just off limits, off what I'm talking
Sure.
about. The Afghanistan experience, many of the British soldiers, particularly the younger soldier, brought on, and we found out later, PTSD, post-traumatic stress disorder,
yeah,
in a huge way. And many of the people living on the streets now in certain parts of the country are ex-soldiers. Because they're unable to cope with life, and if they're not able to cope with life, they're not able to marry because the wife doesn't want it. Whereas those that were married, yes, they're going through PTSD.
Yeah.
But there's partially systems to look after them. But
you're sympathetic to them, obviously.
I am, yes, and I think it's a rough call. But in a way, although the army is now reducing in size, it's actually got less people serving than its proposed size because of things like PTSD. People are not joining the army. Now, when I was much younger, a lot of people were crying out to join the army because they wanted that kind of service.
And the economy is starting to tank in England in the 70s.
But the PTSD has brought a different perspective at all. Completely different perspective to serving in the army. The same must have been the same for the Americans, basically.
Well, the friend that I'm talking about, it wasn't exactly peace. It was peacetime in our country, but he was on a ship outside of Lebanon, watching the war going on. But he said there was just such a seriousness. This is 82, around the time of the Falklands was 82, 83?
Yes.
Okay. So, so you get your new posting in tank transport. Was that a long-lasting one? Or was that the one?
No. Posting was normally 2 to 3 years.
Okay. And then you meet Jenny.
No,
not yet.
I had a tour of duty in Singapore.
Oh, what was that like?
I was working in the Joint Services Port Unit. Would you like some more?
I'm good. I'm fine. I still have a bunch in here.
All right. Because
how do you hear about a posting? And you can take a break if you want. Do you just get a letter? Do you have to report?
No. The system. There's a posting authority.
And how soon before do you know? Like, okay,
you get told 6 months, 2 months.
Did you ever get told and say, "Oh shit, I don't want to go to this place"? Did you ever feel that way?
Not really. No, because you take. I'm an officer, I go where I'm ordered, basically. That's the philosophy I had, anyway.
How long from lieutenant to captain?
6 to 8 years.
Wow.
It could be 6, it could be 8.
So, by the time you meet Phil's mom, what rank are you?
I was a captain.
You were a captain by then?
No, I beg your pardon, I was a major, sorry.
Wow. So, the longer it went, I mean, did you ever have the sort of the inkling, okay, when this posting is done, or how long you signed up for? Do you have to re-up after every few years, or how do you make it?
I signed up for a full career.
For a full career,
which in the army is 34 years. The assumption is you get commissioned at 21 because they went to Santos. But I'd done it a different way. I left university and when I was commissioned I was 24. And so it's 34 years. So after 34 years you go out on pension. I think they've changed the rules since I left, but I'm not sure. But I have been told that the civil service that joins up with the army in civil locations, they don't have any retirement date. There's a man of 83 still working in Worthy Down.
Are there chaplains in the service? I mean, were there Catholic chaplains that were?
Yes, there were.
What were they like?
They were fine. But I think probably, as is happening in life, there are less people joining religious orders.
Yeah, that's true.
There might be a Catholic chaplain, but he covers a much wider area now. And I suspect they can't do church on every Sunday, so they might do every second Sunday or Sunday and a Saturday.
Right.
Saturday.
So did you regularly go to services as a soldier?
Believe it or not, I never once missed a service.
No kidding.
Wherever I was in the world.
So that's why I asked. You went to that church that the sheikh was so.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And who conducted the services there?
The Italian priest.
The Italian priest. Okay, so this wasn't were the masses in Latin?
They were at a certain time, then they changed into using your own language. So at that time, the masses were in Latin. Yeah.
Do you miss that ever? Like the old time?
Well, in my missal, I still have Latin and English.
Because it's a beautiful. I love hearing the And I'm Jewish, and I like going to the Catholic services. I find
right. Because-
I find like a liturgical kind of similarity, obviously, because it all comes from the same place. But especially in sort of the more secularized, less religious strains of Judaism, the call and responses are the same. The benedictions are very much the same. You know, the only thing missing is just the mention of Christ or whatever. But
Yeah.
it's similar. And then, when my friend's father died, and he was one of the big benefactors of Irish heritage here in Chicago. So you had fiddlers and like, it was a real Irish Catholic. I wouldn't say a traditional, but they incorporated it,
Yeah.
with the bagpipes and stuff like that.
Oh yes, so right, the soldier regiments.
Were there-
On
were
the
there-
social guys, you'd have the Irish fiddlers. Yes.
Yeah, and were there? I was telling a friend of mine that one of the reasons why I'm talking to you, because I need some kind of perspective and just breakdown of British Army, because I'm writing something, and one of the men that I'd interviewed had been with I don't know if it was 45 or 47 Royal Marines, or no, it was with the 6th Commando on D-Day, and he landed with the Piper Mullen and Lord Lovett.
Yes.
And so he said that the bagpipes were blowing, as they were landing, but you couldn't hear the bagpipes because of all the shells.
Yeah.
And then when the guy took a break, he just heard the Lord Lovett say, "Well done, the Piper." And no one could hear anything, but he was like, "Well done."
But they'd have heard him in his immediate proximity.
Absolutely. Did they have bagpipes anywhere in any guys who played it when you were in the service?
No, to be honest, no. But but if we had a formal parade,
Yes.
of any description, we would always try to have a band with us to do the marching and everything.
At every
else.
posting, was there ever a formal parade that you had to go through? Or were those few and far between?
Formal parades existed,
Mhm.
but they weren't in every unit at every occasion, sort of thing. You might, remember one thing I'm close to getting is remembrance.
Okay, if you want to take a 2-minute break, then we'll talk about Singapore and on.
Yeah, fine.
All right, those are great. I like the image of the.
Are you on at the moment?
Yeah.
Okay. Going back to that time, as the result of the rebellion in Aden,
How do you spell Aden?
Aden,
Okay, Aden. Yeah.
Aden. Several shops, particularly run by Jewish people, close to that 7 Years' War.
In Aden.
Yes.
No kidding. So there were Jews in that area still?
The shops had to be cleared,
Oh.
and they were brought up to our barracks, put in a safe area. And one night I was on duty, and as a procedure, you walked along past this place. I just had my torch out, and I just caught a pair of eyes. So I called the guardroom, and they came up, and I said, "There is someone in there. Come out now, or you will be shot." And this chap came up. We opened it up, and we found out that they'd found their way in from outside the barracks by digging a tunnel and coming up inside a plastic box.
Oh, so this is one of the terrorists, or the...
Yeah.
Wow.
Well, they weren't terrorists against us. They wanted the property. the
Oh,
goods.
I understand.
Yeah, they were thieves.
Oh, okay.
And so we did a search. We found 2 others. So they were taken away and just dealt with them.
Oh, wow. This is...
And this is a true story, this one. The orders for opening fire in Aden on day 1 read, "Halt or I fire 3 times." And one night someone came up to one of the guard posts, and the sentry said, "Halt or I fire 3 times." The man didn't halt, and the soldier fired 3 times. Think about it.
Yeah.
Halt or I fire 3 times.
And then he shot...
I reported this matter
Yeah.
as I happened to be on duty that night.
Yeah. Did you hear the shots?
I had the shot, so I was up there straight away. But that was, then the normal procedures took over. I didn't get involved in the other procedures.
And how would
But I
someone know
did
what you're
report.
saying?
No, because I'm also a university graduate.
Sure.
I reported to the headquarters that the orders for opening fire in Aden were wrong. Because what they should have written was halt or I fire, comma, 3 times. And that night they changed the orders. And the next door orders were produced. And that's a true story.
Why wouldn't they be orders in Arabic or something like that if you're shouting to...
No, because... no, that would be unfair to the English soldier.
Oh, okay. So who was shot?
Someone outside. He wasn't killed, he was shot.
Okay.
But that, again, that's a true story.
Did you find a lot... I mean, were there, being a university graduate and probably a free-thinking intellectual, having come from Dublin, I mean, did you get along with other officers? Was there...
Oh, no problem at all.
So you weren't an anomaly or anything?
No, not at all. Well, they might have thought I was an anomaly because I was redhead and graduate sort of thing, you know.
Right.
But other than that, no, I was accepted, and I always have been. I've never had a problem.
Was your mother in the territorial service or anything?
No, she was a doctor.
She was a doctor.
A proper doctor.
But did she do anything? You said the 30s. Did she work in any kind of military capacity?
No. She was a GP.
Okay.
And if you think about it, they would have taken all the men out into the field.
Sure.
To get to fill up the doctor spaces. But she was a GP in Derby.
Was Derby bombed at all?
Yes.
Wow. So
the Rolls-Royce Works and the Central Railway was where all the carriages were built.
And so, I mean, as a baby, you were probably in shelters sometimes during any of the bombings, or were there?
I don't remember, but I do remember one day, and this has nothing to do with.
Sure. But I'm interested in the history.
I was in a pram outside the house in Hospital Road. I must have been about 2.5, 3 maybe. And I have a very clear memory of a bomber going overhead with both engines ablaze. And I don't remember whether I saw this underneath open it had dropped all its bombs or what. But it came back to me when about 25 years later there was the local paper produced articles written 25 years ago.
Sure.
And they talked about a German bomber going into the lake about 1.5 miles from where I lived. That was the one that I saw as a baby.
So that was a crash landing. Wow.
Yeah.
Did when people talk about England, the post-war years, because that's you're 7 years old through let's say 1945 to 55. They talk about there was still a black market and rationing and stuff like that.
Yes, there was rationing. Yes.
And did that sort of color your youth at all? Did you remember things going without?
It did, yes. 2 things I remember quite clearly. One, there were 3 boys at school with me, and their names were Maya, and they were known as Maya Major, Maya Minor, Minor Minimus. And they lived in Kenya, and they were sent to Kenya. And in Kenya, they could send food parcels. Mm-hmm. So the boys used to get food parcels about once a month, and they always had stuff inside it that we couldn't get hold of.
What was
it? They were very popular boys. Well, chocolate for one.
Oh, okay.
So,
did your parents smoke cigarettes? No one smoked. No.
There was a very close coterie of friends of theirs, and people tried to be friends and couldn't be.
Wow.
But what I do remember is the last week before I left school in July 59. Mm-hmm. No, July. I'm trying to think. July 51. July 51.
Yeah.
That's when I went to America.
July of 51.
Yeah, but July 51, they stopped the restriction on the sale of chocolate, and my mother sent me a bar of chocolate in the mail. That was just it. I was there at the end of chocolate ration.
Wow. People like us take it for granted, because we've never. Been without fruit, been without all these little things, and that's
what my children and grandchildren have never fully understood.
Well, we understand it in the abstract.
We ate everything that was put in front of us because there wasn't an awful lot, and the vegetables were not really first choice. Turnips, but that's why I always have a clean plate. I never leave anything. I never have done.
What if the food keeps coming?
No. I would say stop the food.
That's my problem, is that it just keeps coming and I want to keep eating. What do you remember? Did you like the music at the time? Did you like rock and roll and things like that?
Absolutely.
So do you remember when you first heard Elvis and all that?
Yeah.
What did you think of the Beatles when they came out?
I thought they were terrific. I thought they were great, and as the Stones. But just again, a short story.
Yeah, please.
I was great friends with a chap called Peter Townsend, who was a subaltern with me in the RCT, and we had both, at the end of our training course, gone on a horse transport course in Aldershot, preparing us for a possible posting to Hong Kong to the Pack Transport Squadron. It never actually happened, but his brother wrote and sang a pop song called Winchester Cathedral, which is not top of the pops exactly, but it was up there. You may have heard it. Winchester Cathedral, da-da-da-dee-da.
Well, I know that Graham Nash did a song sort of like that later on. He had been in the Hollies, but I didn't know that there was.
So I was best friend with the pop singer's brother.
Wow. And then, of course, there's another Peter Townsend that became well known from The Who. But okay, so you liked.
That was with an H.
Oh, okay.
Townsend.
Were there like Teddy Boys in your town and things like that, or greasers?
Yeah. But
it wasn't like
the army didn't sort of take much account of them, basically.
Right. No, but when you were a kid, when you were when the greasers and like the rock and roll started.
Well, hang on, I do remember the friction caused by Teddy Boys fighting the
mods.
The mods, yeah. Well, it was more mods and rockers.
Yeah.
Teddy Boys was not quite exactly the same, but they was always fancily dressed and pouncing around, basically.
Right. The mods, I mean, they drove the scooters. I saw a girl driving a Vespa today. Wasn't necessarily, but
and the rockers were
the motorcycles.
Motorbikes.
They like the gear. But okay, so when we left off, you were going to Singapore, and this was back in what, 73?
Yeah. Again, a little story about Singapore.
Please.
I went out there to a place called Joint Services Port Unit, Far East, brackets Far East, and basically we were based in the dockyard, and we controlled all the shipping for the British forces, either on landing ships logistical, which is LSLs, going to Hong Kong, or putting military stuff on board civilian freighters going back to the UK, sort of thing, basically. And we just controlled it all.
Right.
And I had the rare privilege on one occasion of putting the largest load that had ever been put on LSL Sir Lancelot. I've got the...
LSL is a boat,
thing.
Correct?
Yeah, LSL, landing ship logistical.
Yeah.
Of 1,000 tons, and that was the biggest weight it ever had on it. And I've got the loading plan somewhere in my...
Where was it sailing to? Or where was it
going to Hong Kong.
Okay, so how far was Singapore from Hong Kong?
Well, again, Singapore...
It's just like across...
bottom of Malaysia.
Yeah.
So you go round China, Hong Kong.
Wow. You imagine if you were having anxiety. I hope this thing doesn't sink.
No. But what was the other thing? There was that, and we began dealings with the naval base in the north of Singapore.
Sure.
And I was a captain RCT. If ever I wanted to ring the naval base to speak to someone, I would just ring the number and they would say hello, and I'd say, good morning, this is Captain Simmonds, could I possibly blah blah blah. And I wasn't thinking along any specific lines, that was me.
Yeah.
But you could hear them almost stand to attention at the far end, because naval captains, not army captains, are the highest rank you can achieve, basically. So they always thought I was an RN captain. I only realised it after about a couple of weeks, and
Then you kept doing it?
No, I kept doing it, but saying from the RCT.
Okay.
But that was just one of those little memories I have.
That's interesting. What did...
Can you imagine someone standing at attention with
Sure.
Yes.
Their careers flashing in front of their eyes.
When you want it, sir, yesterday or today.
Yeah.
That sort of obedience.
Did you like the food in the military?
Yes.
So it was always good.
Yeah.
And were there foreign nationals or people who had emigrated to the UK? Did you ever have like someone who had been from the West Indies, Jamaica, or Indian troops, or anything like that? Guys who had
We had the odd Indian. I had a Corporal Singh from India in my troop of 5 because I only had these 5 vehicles.
the solid
in Aden.
Okay,
Corporal Singh.
Yeah.
And he got posted shortly after I arrived. So it was just incidental. But yes, he was, and he was allowed to wear his turban.
So he was a Sikh, right?
With a RCT thing in his.
That's sort of like the guy in The English Patient, who was going out looking for mines and stuff.
Yeah.
But ever any
Great film, eh?
oh, it's the best. But were there people from? Did you ever have any Jamaican guys in your outfit?
We had 1 or 2. They weren't huge numbers, but they came along our lines. They weren't sort of foreign. You with me? They were part of the British structure abroad.
Yes. And so was that? So you were in Singapore for how many years? Were you there
3.
for 3 years? And so and still still a single guy. This
Yes.
was before you met. And
Before I met Jenny.
okay. Was that would guys go out at night? I mean, did you have was the nightlife in Singapore fun?
Yes, very definitely.
So you had a good
And one
time.
of the favourite spots for the average single guy to go was along the main drag in Singapore. And rather than going out to restaurants and paying a lot of money for an evening meal, you go and sit down at these roadside what do they call them? Roadside cafes.
Yeah, sure.
Roadside tables run by local Indians or whatever, Singaporeans, because there was basically Singapore was Indian, Chinese, or Malay.
Okay. I didn't know that. I didn't know that there was a strong Indian contingent there.
And they had all these for sale things
Okay.
at their tables. They had little fireplaces at the side, and you could get an evening meal for about £4.
It's not bad.
$6.
Yeah. Would officers there was no real socializing going on between enlisted guys and officers, were there? I mean,
that's something that very rarely happens, to be truthful. There is that distinction made between officers' mess, sergeants' mess, and the NAFI, which is where the corporals are below. There's a corporals club in the NAFI, and below corporals you just use the NAFI. You've got no club as such.
His Lance Corporal that's the lowest non-commissioned officer, right?
Yes.
Okay. And
Private, Lance Corporal, Corporal, Sergeant, Staff Sergeant, WO2, WO1.
And so when did you maintain any friendships with anyone that you'd known when you were in, let's say, a Singapore posting and you were there for 3 years? Career guys like yourself?
Well, no. Not specifically, but if you met people you'd worked with again, you always,
of course,
logged in. Do you know what I mean? But it was very rarely you had a friendship with a senior NCO or a junior NCO that was anything further than local. You got on with them socially.
Sure.
I mean, as I said in Sharjah, I took my troop down to the beach.
Yes.
On
That was
Christmas
a Stingray
Day.
incident.
Yeah.
Did you was your unit? Were you part of a specific unit that was attached to, let's say, a division or
yes,
regiment?
All our troops, squadrons, regiments were part of, usually, not in all cases, a brigade, or if not a brigade, a corps, division, or a corps. Yes, we always belonged to an agent, a part of the army that had its own identity.
Okay, so in the 70s, so when you're in Singapore, do you remember the outfit name that you were part of?
Well, we were unique.
Okay.
And we were part of Headquarters Far Elf, Far Eastern Land Forces. But we had a very responsible job. We worked with the Navy, with the RAF, and with the Army. Less so with the Air Force, but we did send Air Force, if you like, MFO, military photo organisation. You know, when you were posted back to the UK from Singapore.
Would you be saluted in town by let's say, an enlisted
Very
guy?
rarely.
If you were
No, because in town we tended not to go into town unless we were going out for a local lunch or
Sure.
something. But socially, again, we wore civilian clothes in non-wartime places.
Did you? Okay, so when you left Singapore, you went back home. Did you ever have to go through Korea or anything? Did you ever post there or anything?
No.
Okay, so you meet your wife in what, like 75? You're back, or 74?
Yes, we met. One of my subalterns, I was the captain, I was the second in command of the company, of the squadron. One of my subalterns had got a girlfriend who came from place A. And he came in one night, he said, look, there's a big dance on at the mess in Munster with all the lady teachers, and Marie would like some of us to go along as guests. So about 6 of us went. And that's where I met Jenny, that night.
Well,
And it was like,
boom. Yeah.
well, from my point of view, it
Sure.
was. Not sure about her.
We'll ask. But did you know, in a situation like that,
Our eyes touched.
your eyes touch, you fall in love, but you say, look, I'm a career officer. I might be going lots of different places.
Yes, we discussed that before we married. She was a British Forces Education Service teacher.
Yeah.
So in a way, she understood the service life because she's taught service children in Munster. That was her first army posting,
Sure.
if you like, or BFES posting.
Yeah.
And I said, look, darling, you know, the way it is, I'm going to be required to go from place A to place B to place C. As long as you can accept that and we can get the children into school, that's fine. We can either board them or teach them locally. And because she was a teacher within the military system, she understood exactly what I was talking about. But she accepted that was a limitation that I could not control.
Yeah.
I couldn't say, look, I'm married, I don't want to go here, I want to go there. Yes, I'm going here. And
Did she start posting with you when you would go to some of these places?
What would happen would be she would let them know that she was leaving because her husband was posted.
Yeah.
And she would say that we're going to Minden, let's say, for instance. And there was a school structure in Minden. And then she would be ring-fenced, if you like, to serve in Minden, sort of thing. But there were times, like in Singapore, when it wasn't exactly the same.
But you weren't with her yet?
No, not yet.
Okay, yeah.
We met in 5-4 Squadron, and then when I was posted to the field ambulance at Hona.
God, you've had so many different little occupations. I mean, the same occupation, but with it's sort of like.
Just to read that, don't.
Yeah.
So Minden, Hona Field Ambulance, Worthy Down, transfer in course, Aldershot, Minden, Paymaster 1 DWR, Leicester, RPO, Leicester, Worthy Down, training and development, Middle Wallop, special job as SO2 AAC, the Falklands, 6-month tour, Gibraltar, 3-year tour, back in Wilton, headquarters UK, left, and then Worthy Down.
Let's talk about the Falklands, and obviously you were not bringing the family to that.
No, they were always single postings.
Okay, so
I'll tell you a story.
yeah, please.
It was a straightforward job. I was in charge of the admin and pay because the RAPC had by now become the Adjutant General's Corps brackets Staff and Personnel Support (SBS), and we looked after admin and pay. So I became the, if you like, the central admin focus for all the military people on.
It's almost like a CFO or something like that.
Yeah. And we had either a platoon or a small company of Marines co-based with us. And this is a true story, by the way, another true story. He came out and he heard the men talking about bennies. And he said, what on earth is a benny?
Oh, the pills?
No. There was a TV series on at the time with a chap called Benny in it who always wore a beret or a woolen hat.
Right. Not Benny Hill. Right.
But all the Falklanders, because of the weather conditions, always wore woolen hats.
Oh, okay.
So they were known as bennies. by the
Gotcha.
majority of the infantry.
Gotcha.
Right. And the general said, look, this is disrespectful of your host company. Please stop doing this. And apparently he came back about 9 months or a year later. So I came into the second part of it. The first part had happened by the time I arrived in Falklands. And he heard the men talking about stills. I said, what on earth is a still? He said, there's still bennies. There's still bennies.
Steel Betties.
Have you got that? They used to be called bennies.
Yes.
So they're still bennies, so we're calling
Oh,
them
they're
stills.
still bennies. Okay. Oh, stills. Okay, that's so that was their way around it.
But we found out the position reversed because he then went on a trip to the main Falkland headquarters.
Argentina.
No.
Oh, no.
I forget the name of the town, but it was a place where, if you like, the place was run from.
Yes.
And he heard the locals talking about When-Eyes. And he said, what's a When-Eye? Oh, he said, they're soldiers, General. Because if you hear a soldier talking, what's the first thing he says? When I was in Aden, Singapore, Gibraltar. When-Eye.
Yeah.
And that's a true story.
That's a great story.
So, bennies, stills, and When-Eyes.
And this is
and it was 50-all. It was a draw.
in the Falklands.
Yeah.
Okay, so when before you went, you obviously went after the fighting, but did you notice because it's a wartime condition, when you're back in England and like in terms of mobilization, and it's all they have. It's the only war they have to gear up for.
If you like, they were a residential peacekeeping force on the same side as they weren't occupying.
Yes.
They were helping. Because the Falklanders, as you know, could not resist an Argentine invasion. So they were there as a small help force. And in a way, we were just made welcome. We just got on with life, basically. The Marines would go out on patrol. But we were there basically to protect them from invasion by sea or invasion by air. They were at the Port Stanley, by the way, is the name of that town. Port Stanley. And
so you were controlling the pay of these guys?
of the military, of the army.
Okay.
Not the RAF or the Navy.
Okay.
Although I did become involved while I was there.
So how were they cutting checks on the base for these guys, or like how do you pay a soldier?
Well, he was
abroad?
paid in the normal way through his bank account.
Okay.
Now, cash-paid soldiers might want to be paid in the local currency because they've got no bank account.
Right.
So that was part of the system, and that's what we did. But the imprest, if you like, the official military accounting system, imprests, was run by the Air Force, because the Air Force had the bigger responsibility of the local air station where I was stationed.
Sure.
And they had a problem with that they couldn't balance their accounts. And
Were you good at accounting and stuff like that?
I was. I had to.
Really?
Yeah. So I volunteered, if you like. I said, look, I'll help out.
Right.
Wing commander. And I just went through the system. It's the only way you can do it.
Sure.
But maybe they didn't have that kind of a mental setup. And I after about a couple of days going through all the accounts, the PV, payment vouchers and receipt vouchers, I said, there's a dichotomy on those two dates. You've received in money that no one else has paid in. And somehow you appear to have paid something out that no one received. And we resolved it because the RAF imprest also funded the Army imprest on a secondary basis. And it was the difference between the imprest account from the Royal Air Force and that of the Army.
How long did that take to solve?
Yeah, but it resolved itself.
Yeah. So is this your first non-logistical posting?
When I came back
From Singapore.
from Singapore, I was in 5-4 Squadron RCT Minden. Then I was in Hona with the 28th Field Ambulance. And I don't really have any stories from Hona.
At what point do you post to Northern Ireland?
I went to Northern Ireland firstly when I was in Minden with 5-4 Squadron. We took a detachment to Northern Ireland.
What kind of detachment? This was the ambulances?
They were, if you like, resident vehicles.
Okay.
And people came in from outside to look after the. You didn't bring your own vehicles with you, and a pointless exercise. Yeah. And when I came from Minden, we had a sort of large troop. We didn't deploy the whole squadron.
Where's the port of entry? Is it in near?
No, for us it was by air. We came into the airport, and we just did admin jobs basically, and delivered money and was.
Now, were you ever? You mentioned something about you never missing any services. Did you ever? Where were you posted in Northern Ireland? What
Londonderry.
Londonderry. That's so funny. I once made a mistake of saying Londonderry in front of a bunch of Catholic or like the ones from the other side. They were like Derry.
Derry.
Yeah.
Because of the friction
Yes.
and why we were there, I was not really able to go to a Londonderry church.
Right.
But I did go to a Catholic service within the brigade.
Right.
Inside the main barracks.
But there's a strange kind of, I don't know if I'm just in like an existential mode, but here you're a Catholic, because I watched the documentary and I couldn't imagine just like the real kind of anti-Catholic sentiment, in some people in Northern Ireland, obviously on the Unionist side or and so did any of that ever trickle, into bases where you have soldiers from, let's say, Londonderry, who are serving amongst
we
you?
We did have Irish people,
Yeah.
both sides of the religious border, if you like.
Yeah.
And they just coped.
Yeah.
The army, the British soldier, is taught basically to cope with any situation within which he finds himself. Look, Aden, for instance, yeah, and Northern Ireland was another example. You wore the army khaki and you did the army khaki job.
Right.
And you didn't get involved with what was going on there. But what I did find, accepting the fact that I was a Catholic, and that Londonderry was basically
Protestant.
Northern Irish Protestant
Sure.
with Catholics there,
Yeah.
the Northern Irish Protestant, in my experience, didn't so much as look down on, but just sort of say, "Oh, the poor people. We're so sorry for them. They've got no imagination," and it was this ephemeral sense of superiority that really hacked me off, because I was one of the underlings.
Yes. Yes.
So that's just one thing I observed, and I didn't know more about it. I just accepted that's how they felt about one another.
Right, but were you ever? This was in the late 70s, early 80s,
Yeah,
or
70s.
So this is when during the so-called Troubles, like when they called it that.
We were there.
And can you just describe like the mood it was to be a British officer in Northern Ireland at that time, and were there any misconceptions of the place from people back home? Oh, you're going to Northern Ireland and it's going to be dangerous, and
there was that initial conspection, if you like. I do remember not going out of barracks very much, other than to do my job.
yes. And what was your job there?
I was my officer commanding was down further south, and I was, if you like, looking after the northern section of the transport aspect in Derry. So we were not quite a squadron in size, and I had a large detachment up there, and he had the rest of the squadron down here. And I used to go down every so often to liaise and whatever. But I ran the, if you like, the impressed account and what have you, as an RCT officer.
Was there a general mood in the area? Was it, or like any other posting?
I didn't feel any different there than anywhere else, other than that thing I told you about, feeling that the poor Catholics were being looked down upon by the local Protestant majority.
And you were liked by the local Protestant majority.
Because a lot of what we dealt with was things municipal and what have you, and banking and God knows. I just dealt with them as people.
Sure.
And I didn't let my own feelings come forward, although I did observe some oddities, as I just explained to you.
But I always wondered if people, especially the ones in the IRA who brought so much trouble to squatties who are serving in Northern Ireland, that there might be a lot of Catholic guys among the British troops, as I'm sure there were.
Yes, sir.
And so that's where it becomes sort of complicated. How many?
No, because
they represent the Queen, I guess.
And I used this expression before.
Yeah.
Because they're representing Her Majesty the Queen.
Exactly.
And they're carrying out their orders to avoid conflict, not to involve themselves in conflict.
Sure.
So, in a way, that's how the mind works.
You mentioned that I want you to tell the story about you'd only gotten one bad report when you were in all your time in the service, and that was when something about guys who were abusing their
their rights to go home during leave or go back to where they came from.
Right.
And what he wanted to do was give the maximum financial help, if you like. It's not quite the right word. To put them in the best possible financial situation, regardless of where they were going. And I used to say to him, "Sir, if they're going home to meet with their wife at her home or their home, he cannot continue to carry on collecting local overseas allowance for Germany.
Okay.
Because he's not in Germany, he's in England." And he didn't like that.
And this is when you were in Germany?
This is when I was in Northern Ireland with the
okay,
my battalion, but I was a paymaster.
Why do you think you didn't like it? I'm just curious. It was just you felt
because he was disobeying the law.
Yeah.
The law in the army, the procedure is, if you're in Germany, you get LOA.
Yeah.
If you're not in Germany, you don't get LOA. So if you decided to go back to England, it was unfair to give you LOA when people serving elsewhere obeyed the rules. It was as simple as that, really.
So you were telling a commanding officer that
what he was doing was not right.
Right, and so how ironic that he turns around and gives you a bad report.
Well,
at face value, it's just, what a prick. Yeah.
It's what they call sod's law, basically.
Yeah. Did while you were serving, this is, I guess, what I want to ask is that aside from just. My friends who are in the military, they say, look, it's very competitive in terms of getting certain jobs and is in terms of career. Did you find a certain sense of competition, or job stability?
I was never of that mind.
Right. And what satisfaction it gave you?
Yes. I didn't like the idea originally of maybe this posting or that posting, but I accepted that's what was going to happen.
Yeah.
And you make the most of what you've got, where you are, when you are, how you are. And apart from that one incident with that particular commanding officer, I adjusted to life in the area I was with fairly simply and uncomplicatedly.
You said that it sort of affected whether or not you would become a brigadier. I mean, there weren't
ways the fact that I didn't get recommended for promotion meant, although I was told by a colleague of mine that in the last year that I was entitled to become promoted to Lieutenant Colonel, I was actually within the list. So I made it.
Wow.
But because of that one odd report, not a balanced report, I didn't make all the confidential reports that were all very positive.
Oh yeah.
Outstanding, and I got several outstandings, but I didn't get one for that particular report. And
did rank?
I was then told I was not going to get promoted, so I either retired or I served on, and I just discussed it with Jenny, and I decided to serve on because I'd enjoyed what I'd done so far.
Right, and you weren't. It wasn't like you don't strike me as the guy where rank means anything other than whatever's commensurate of the job that you're doing at the time, and that you just want to. Wow. And so, how long were you in for total service?
34 years.
34 years. In
fact, I was in for 33. Because of the time I'd spent after university in a civilian job, they would not allow me to claim for that part against my retirement pay. But what I was allowed to do was buy in service. So as I was serving in my last 9 or 10 years, I contributed to my pension a year and a half's worth. That's what they allowed me to do. So when I left, in fact, I was on a full pension.
Was it a weird feeling when you weren't having to put the uniform on anymore when you got out?
Yes, I didn't want to go.
You didn't want to leave?
No.
You were kicking and screaming, essentially.
Well, not exactly kicking and screaming, but adjusting to life, and I became a civil servant working with the army.
Isn't it interesting, though? Do you think that you would have been any different a father if you'd had a son? And, like, you know what I mean? Like, it's because of, you know, you're in the military, and I mean, I always see my my friends' boys as a certain way. I'm thinking, like, much rather have a daughter. I mean, you still have to have the same kind of sternness, but did you ever think, like, wow, if I have a son, you know, am I going to...
No, to be honest with you, that thought never really crossed my mind, because I would have treated all my children equally.
And you were raised among all girls.
Well, yes, I pointed that out. I mean, Jenny laughs, but she knows who the boss is.
Yeah? Were your sisters tough?
Less so.
Less so?
But in the fact that I was the eldest, and I was away at boarding school most of my educational life.
As a boy?
Yeah. They were at day school from home.
Yeah.
So they didn't see me that often, basically. But I used to see them in my holidays, which is about 12 weeks a year.
Do you think that your boarding school experience influenced your decision to never want to go to Oxford or Cambridge?
No.
No?
No.
It wasn't that?
It was just something, if you like, I can't quite put a finger on it. I just thought maybe I won't make it at Oxford or Cambridge.
Right. Really? Like in terms of the scholastics?
I don't know. I can't put a finger on it.
I'd much rather go to school in Dublin anyway.
That's how I felt.
Right.
But because of the Irish connection,
yeah,
I felt I'd give that a go. And
where are you pointing? Oh, wow.
Yeah, they're all here all the time.
Oh, the squirrels?
Yeah.
It
never really bothered me. And looking back, several of my friends went to Oxford from having left Trinity College Dublin. They went to become a lecturer and a professor of English.
And what did you study in Dublin?
I studied French, Spanish, and economics.
Wow. So did you read any novels in the original French? Like,
yes, all of them. Yeah. And Gustavo Becker and Lorca.
What about like Balzac and stuff, like in the French?
Yes.
My friend sent me these great epigrams. Like he said the funniest stuff. Like I'd have to send Phil a copy, but just like these great little these epigrams. How it's something like you'd never trust a Frenchman, or like just these really funny things. Yeah. But wow, so you read Lorca. Did you get to go to Spain as a young?
Yes, I went to a summer course.
Was it fun?
In Alicante. I fell in love with Spain.
I love it.
Yeah.
Oh, so when you were in Gibraltar, that was obviously, I mean...
Oh, yes, we used to travel across the border. But because of the way things were at the time, things could turn nasty overnight. After London, I went to Hona to join the field ambulance as an RCT officer. It was at that point the next posting they were going to give me was as a training major in a TA unit in the northeast of England.
Territory, your original...
Yeah, when I was... And that really was the final pointer. Because the unit I was going to be posted to, when I'd been in 5-4 Squadron in Minden, they were the TA unit that came out to stay with us for the summer training. And they virtually trashed our officers' mess. And I did not want to go back there. So that was one...
Trashing in bad behaviour or just not cleaning up?
Yes. Turning in one point. And the other was, when I was in 5-4 Squadron, I did a transport job and an admin job sequentially.
Yeah.
And the admin job meant I ran the impress to the officers' mess. And I had an inspecting officer come from division, from the RAPC, and I just liked him, a chap called Tony Cherrill. And we just talked, and I thought, I quite like this concept, and I decided to join the RAPC, where
Which is what?
I was going to be paid to run the the interest account rather than do it as an RCT officer.
Oh wow! So
Sort
you
of
went.
thing.
That's where you made the switch from RCT.
That's where I made the mental switch.
The mental.
And I applied to do the transfer in course, and they accepted me after I left home.
So you were done with the RCT by when?
75.
Okay, so wow, and then because that might have been a different type of. Had you stayed in there, you might have
I was
been.
8 years RCT.
But but if let's say, what would you have been doing at the time of the Falklands had you still been in RCT?
I was in Singapore.
Okay, no, but what I'm saying, if what would your job have been?
If I'd been in the RAPC,
Yes,
in the foot.
if you were in the Falklands in a transport logistical kind of capacity.
Oh right, yes.
That would have been much different. You probably would have been
There would
more.
probably there would probably not have been any RCT representation in the Falklands.
Mhm.
Don't think there was
Okay,
actually.
because it was there was no
So-
base there or anything. It was
No, I don't
Okay.
think there was. There was I suspect there might have been a maritime
Mhm.
connection with the port to transport troops from A to B, but I don't think there was, if you like, a pure. No, I don't think there would have been, to be truthful. RCT, no, I don't think there would have been.
So when you were in Gibraltar, what were you doing there? Was that a big base there?
No, I was what they call the SO2 G1 Fin
Uh-huh.
at the Fortress headquarters in Gibraltar.
Okay.
And my main function was financial imprest inspections of the units in Gibraltar. But also I was a contact point between the brigadier and the Gibraltar government administration. I think they used to be due to pay us money for this, that, and the other one. So I had that, but it wasn't a huge job. But I was basically making sure the RAPC in Gibraltar behaved themselves.
When you said that you're the kind of person that wouldn't want to give someone an order that you couldn't do yourself, did you find that? Did you ever have a brigadier that had that same kind of ethos, if you want to call it that?
The brigadier in Gibraltar, he never gave me a bad report. Don't misunderstand me, because I'd already joined the
Right.
RAPC by then. But he was a bit. If it's to my advantage, I would like this to happen.
Oh,
If I
okay.
explained to him that maybe that wasn't such a good idea because 1, 2, 3, he would usually listen. But he was quite a demanding boss in matters financial. But he would listen to what I had to say. I suppose, and I can't put a finger on it, he respected what I'd said and done before the problem came up. I had quite a good working relationship with him, to be truthful. But
Were there brigadiers in Aden? Was there a brigadier down there?
the general,
General, yeah.
headquarters far off, yeah, the general. It was his cricket pitch I sorted.
Oh, okay.
You with me? I know it
Yeah.
sounds a bit stupid.
I love it. It's just, I think it's great.
No, let me just. Are you still recording this or not?
Yeah,
No.
yeah,
Oh, you
yeah,
are?
yeah.
Oh, I thought you'd stop.
No,
I'm sorry.
no. I got it down. I mean, I'll record it all.
Right. So I was 5-4 Squadron in Minden, then Hona Field Ambulance. Then I came back after that chat we had then to join the Royal Army Pay Corps. I then went to serve as paymaster of the Duke of Wellington's regiment, initially in Aldershot, and then in Minden.
What was the Duke of Wellington's regiment? Was that just the name of the regiment?
Battalion.
Okay.
But it was the Duke of Wellington's original regiment. I then went from there to RPO Leicester, Regimental Pay Office Leicester. I then went to Worthy Down for 2.5 years to do training and development. So I've had a lot of very interesting jobs.
So many places.
Yeah, and then to Middle Wallop I spent about 9 months, nearly a year, as the SO2 RAPC, attached to the Army Air Corps for their 25th anniversary of existence.
Okay.
So dealing with a lot of money to do with a big air show that went on.
Were you ever part of any parades for any royalty or like any kind of inspections or anything of that was
Yes, on
like a
two
commemoration?
occasions, but I was just one member of a large
Sure.
and I was there when the Queen came.
That must have been interesting.
2003, she came to the opening of the Adjutant General Corps Museum in Winchester.
Yes.
And I was, if you like, the RAPC representative, because the AGC took people from all original corps, so the RAPC became SPS, Staff and Personnel Support. There was the RMP came in as the RMP, there was the Education Corps as ED,
Yeah.
there was the Pioneer Corps.
Pioneer Corps, yeah. That still exists.
All sorts of bits and pieces.
Were you interested in the history of the Army when you were in? Did you enjoy, as a kid prior to that, did you enjoy history or military history? Or was it just kind of...
I was completely open-minded about history, actually.
but what military, like when, let's say you were part of a certain outfit or... Like, I want to read about the history of the Duke of Wellington's...
Well, that was one aspect.
Yes. Like an afternoon at a museum or the...
No, I'm trying to think of anything that hits me between the eyes. In a way, if something interested me, I'd read about it.
Mm-hmm.
But I was too busy with my job to spend too much time reading into the particular this or that.
Sure.
But I was a reader, don't misunderstand me. Anyway, let me just finish. I was paymaster to Dukes, then I became regimental pay officer Leicester, and I was looking after, if you like, the pay side against the record of service side, which another RAOC organisation looked after within RPO Leicester. And we looked after Royal Electrical and Mechanical Engineers and Royal Army Ordnance Corps, as it was in those days.
Yeah.
And we used to deal with the problems that our pay and records might have. And one of the things I like to say I initiated was because there were four other RPOs, we were always dealing with the same sort of problems, but for different branches of the army.
Sure.
And our contact was a desk officer at the Ministry of Defence, headquarters RAPC, Paymaster and Chiefs Department. So I said, well, look, if we're all dealing with the same problems, why don't we just talk on the phone and discuss
that's a great idea.
and then go to the point of contact.
Sure.
We have discussed, and we think the solution is, and that's what began to happen, and it really worked.
Yeah.
But you see, I have that kind of mind.
But could you
trying
imagine
to solve problems?
Sure. Do you think that had technology like it is now with internet and emails and texting, how that would have affected your career in a positive way?
We were living with the involvement, with the
evolution,
of things like that. And they used to take things. I can't remember all the wording now. They used to take a piece of machinery out with them on exercise to do their Part 2 orders, as they were called.
Oh,
then. Yeah. Now that no longer exists because every unit in the British Army is on the internet.
Yeah.
With their pay department in Glasgow.
Okay.
And ostensibly, the soldier looks after his own matters pay. I dread the idea because they're incapable of doing it, most of them. But anyway, the pay staff, well now the AGC staff who looks after pay and admin, work with them. I mean, just one stupid case when I first arrived in with the Dukes, Duke of Wellington Regiment, in Minden.
That's what they were called, the Dukes?
From the UK.
Yeah.
They're known as the Dukes. Okay. I'm not allowed to talk much longer.
Yeah. What are those cufflinks? Are those the cufflinks you're wearing?
Yeah.
Are they just normal cufflinks? They're really nice.
They've got no significance at all.
Okay, but they're pretty. They're nice.
Yeah, well, that's why I bought them.
Yeah.
Nice. Yeah.
Hey, man.
Sorry. Well,
You were talking about the RPOs and that you had a mind that was able to sort of
Oh yes,
solve
yes.
sort of. That was a communication.
When the Duke's in Minden.
Yes.
That was in the time of the Part 2 order, the manually written Part 2 order, or the type Part 2 order,
Yeah.
which was done away with the introduction of machinery, desktop
Yeah.
machinery. But a man walked into the office one day, just after we'd arrived in Gibraltar, every company having been given a lecture by me before we left about the significance of moving from England to a foreign country.
Oh, okay.
LOA and marriage and God
Yeah.
knows what else. He said, why am I not getting LOA, married LOA? I said, why do you expect to get married LOA?
Yeah.
He said, I got married. I said, did you come and tell us? He said, no.
Who did he marry? Just someone back in England?
Yeah, and
Okay.
I'd come out with him.
Yeah.
But he hadn't recorded the fact.
That would have been
So
me
the
to
pay-
do something
So the
stupid
pay
like
office did not know he was married.
that. Yeah.
Christ knows how he got a quarter. Maybe he just did it round the edge, but
Yeah.
all the admin people within the regiment didn't tell me. But I said, you are required to let us know if you marry, so we can record it on your pay record.
Sure.
And tell our regimental pay office that driver private bloggins, one DWR, married on the 18th of May,
Yeah.
whatever,
How would that have
and is
affected
now
his pay?
entitlement to grant
Oh,
LOA,
okay. Yeah. Well, what does LOA stand for?
local overseas allowance.
Okay. Oh, okay. Did when you got married, did you have a military style wedding, or was it a very? Did you wear your uniform?
I'll show you that in a minute.
Okay.
Just
Okay.
put that
Okay.
aside for
Yeah.
now.
The Dukes.
Yes, and I had an escort and everything else.
All right.
But I'll show you in a minute. So don't worry.
Okay,
about
so
that.
you give this lecture and you're down. This guy shows up, expecting the LOA, doesn't record it.
has not recorded the fact with us that since we left England and arrived in Germany 3 weeks later,
Right.
they had an enter period of leave. He expected us to magically understand that he'd got married and was granted LOA. Now, I explained to him that we may be quite useful at our jobs and we may be fairly technical, but we can't deal with things that we're not told about.
Yeah. Did you ever post to Germany as well? Were you ever there?
Oh, yes.
Where? And how long were you there?
I was in the field ambulance in Hone,
Oh, that's right. So that was wow.
and I was with 5-4 Squadron in Minden.
Where's Menden?
Minden is in central Germany, near
Okay.
Bielefeld, near Hanover. Hanover, near the border.
Sure. Did you like it there?
I loved it.
Hi.
Hello.
Come on out.
Lovely to see you. Have you had a nice time? Good. Can you give us a couple more minutes and then we'll talk, okay? Good girl.
I told Philip, I said, I'm the president of the Serena fan club. I said, the retired president. So, okay, so when you were in Minden, and but you loved it there. Was it great? The ambulance posting was a great one.
Minden was 5-4 Squadron.
Okay.
The transport squadron.
Okay.
So I was more of an admin and a pay capacity than I was a transport,
Sure.
a troop leader. But we were responsible for carrying huge amounts of heavy goods and also what am I looking for now? I'll think about it in a minute.
Okay.
Don't worry about it. Let me just read a couple of
Sure.
things.
Sure. Go ahead. Go.
I went to Leicester to RPO Leicester to do with Matters Pay. They came down, Worthy down, to do training development, which is an interesting period because some of the work I did there led to the development of the Adjutant General's Corps, because one of the things we did was inspect those local units based at headquarters throughout the country where the RAPC detachment looked after everyone in the vicinity,
Right.
not the regiment or the battalion. Are you with me?
Yes.
Yeah. And they also looked after pay and admin. And I thought this was a logical process. They should be looking after pay and admin. And I wrote a report on the visits we'd done to about 4 different places.
Did it change?
Same
Were you able to?
No, the work I'd done led to the establishment of the Adjutant General's Corps.
So were you often giving lectures when you were or was it an option, or is it something that you found challenging? Like, I'm gonna sort of be the expert on this specific thing.
Several of the jobs I did demanded that kind of mind.
Yes.
because you were doing a job and you thought, well, why am I doing it this way? Why can't I do it that way? Because, or let's think about it. But the greatest job I did, and I think looking back, it really gave me a degree of pleasure, was there was a period in the mid-80s where they had 3 periods of downsizing of the army. And it was called Redundancy 1, Redundancy 2, Redundancy 3.
Okay.
And this could have affected senior officers, junior officers, senior ranks, and junior soldiers.
And these are people ordering redundancy. Like you could have been a victim of that. Yeah.
But because of what I'd done at Southwest District, I'd asked if I could stay in and pay for the extra couple of years. And I think, looking back, I don't know, but I suspect, although I was a major, not a lieutenant colonel or a colonel, I was respected for the work I'd done on my job. I went on all these lectures, and I had to write a script to all these people going into redundancy. If you think about redundancy,
Not a pleasant topic.
no. And I was thinking, I've got to think of this logically, not mechanically.
Okay.
Right. Let me ask you, if you had to leave your job and you were married with children, yes, what things would affect your decision making in years to come?
If you were to ask me to leave my with Joe, what?
Okay, let me give
Not
you the
leaving
answer.
the job.
Where am I going to live?
Sure.
Am I going to buy a house or not? What's the education like for my children? What are the job prospects? And what about my wife?
And my kids. Yeah.
Well, I meant, yeah.
Yeah, sure. Family.
And I gave the lecture, and then we'd talk afterwards with individually.
Yeah.
And I had these 5 cards with me. And I would say to each one of them, place those cards in order of priority. And somehow he put one. No 2 people did the same thing. Had the same thoughts.
But was there a consistent answer for one?
Well, there was, really.
Yeah.
Are you thinking about you? Are you thinking about education? Are you thinking about your wife? Are you thinking about your children? Are you thinking about your job? Are you thinking about, am I going to buy a house? Now, in those days, housing was a lot cheaper.
Yes.
Are you with me?
Yes.
We don't have the problems we've got now.
Right.
My £40,500 house is now worth £750,000.
Isn't that amazing?
It's ridiculous.
Isn't that amazing?
It's ridiculous.
It's.
not
I hope it goes up and you can sell it.
Well, no.
I know. I understand.
Selfish. But,
Yeah.
but it was amazing in that in about 80% of the cases, the women accompanied their husbands to this talk, which in a way was the right thing to have done.
How do you advertise something like this? And were you?
Oh no! It went round. There will be this talk.
Okay.
In
And was this your idea to have the talk?
No. I was partially involved, but it wasn't my idea.
Because it was part of what the mood at the time. People are being
And
kicked out.
it was part of the service we could have provided.
Yes.
Yeah.
So you had some pretty nervous people, probably.
We did, yes. Yeah. And actually, it was some of the officers who didn't really think along the right lines. But when they were faced, they realised, oh, shit, I've forgotten about that. That it put some of their minds more at rest. Are you with me? I could go away now and I could think about, look, shall I live with Jenny's parents for a year and look for a house and put the children in for education? Or shall we go somewhere totally new where housing prices are cheaper and we know there's good schools and Jenny could or could not get a job, sort of thing.
Yeah.
But they began thinking in terms of me rather than sort of us.
Well, because me being the provider who's going to be able to make it. So how do you feel so that you put, what was the one little component that you did put people's mind at rest?
Because you're leaving a service that you've served loyally for X, Y, Z years.
These are careerist people.
90% of them
are
career people. They weren't short service. And I said, the least I can do is, if I can't put your mind at rest, I can show you how perhaps you ought to make your decision-making system work for you. Okay, and it was I've still got those cards somewhere at home.
Could this apply? I mean, is this a lesson that could possibly translate into any career?
I think so.
Oh, but it's interesting. One of the things that we talked about, you know, I became friendly with this guy who was actually retired as a brigadier general because he just stayed in the reserves for so long. But he wrote a book. He was a social scientist, a sociologist, and he wrote a book called "As If People Mattered" about dignity in the workplace. And he sort of just nurtured this process along that he'd learned in the army. You know, how not to wield authority and all this other kind of stuff. But no, but like this, we could end on here. But like, what were some of the things that their minds were at rest after you talked to them? Because there's a solution involved.
Yes, there is. 90% of them came across to thank me at the total end.
Right.
But I observed that most of the future decision makers were the wives.
Mm-hmm. So you empowered the women.
Well, no, that's not so much. But I began thinking about it from my point of view.
Yeah.
What's going to be important to me?
Yeah.
And I always told you that I was a thinker. You know, what's the best way to produce a solution?
Yeah.
And I'll give you one last example before we stop.
Please.
When I was at At the time I was occupied in Southwest District.
The When-I's and the Stills.
Yes.
Right.
When I was in Southwest District, I had a general called Barry Lane, who we occasionally chatted to because he liked to know all his stuff.
Yeah.
And rather sadly, his wife died shortly before he was due to retire. And I went to give my commiserations to everyone else. And I found out, either directly or indirectly, that he was going to retire in the normal course of events, you know, the right age, and then get married to a new wife.
Oh.
Yes?
Yeah.
Makes sense so far?
Sure.
And I was wondering, I said, well, surely to God, if he goes out as a bachelor and he marries, he's not going to get anything for his wife if he dies.
Yeah.
Of his widow.
Yeah.
And I went back and I looked at all the bloody regulations, but they weren't very clear. And I rang the MOD and I said, look, he's been married all this time. He wants to get married shortly after he leaves the army, yet he's going to leave the army as a bachelor.
Yeah.
And we looked at all the regulations between us because the MOD hadn't come across this particularly as an item.
He's being investigated. So.
Well, no, he wasn't. The system was being...
Sure.
And there were two very, if you like, vague references within regulations. But basically it turned out that if you were single when you left the army, regardless of what had happened or what was going to happen, and you died later on, you died from their point of view as a bachelor. So this is ridiculous. So I went to Barry Lane's office. You know, okay. I'm quite used to talking to senior officers, but this was actually something I felt I needed to confront him with.
And he's a general.
I said, General Barry, you know us. May I suggest that you reconsider your marriage decisions and marry before you leave the army? And I explained why, and he said, thank you very much, I did not realise that.
Oh, that's interesting.
And he married.
Wow.
But the new wife was a friend of his old wife and himself. You with me?
So there's no scandals involved.
He wasn't doing anything scandalous.
Right.
But he married, believe it or not, the day before he left the army. And he thanked me.
How does that? But does that affect a certain payout or a certain?
Absolutely.
Okay, so if
I die tomorrow, Jenny gets half my pension.
Good. All right, and if he wouldn't have gotten the wife,
his widow would have got no pension.
Wow. So you
she'd have got the state side, but not the army side.
Is he still alive? Have you talked to him or?
I don't know, but I doubt it. He
was older.
Yes, he probably in his 90s now.
Were there still guys in that were from World War II, like any important figures when you had joined? Like, did you hear war stories when you were in the service, or no, not really?
Not really. Not to be truthful, no, not really.
No, I mean it's. I'm always curious, but they always change. Stories change over time, you know, and
But what I've had time to reflect on my service life,
Yeah.
but we were in the service during very not traditional times, evolutionary times. Because of
Evolution.
everything that's happened.
Yes.
Not revolutionary, evolutionary. How you talked about things, how you dealt with married life, how you dealt with quartering and everything else. And in today's army, for instance, the quartering of soldiers and their wives is no longer run by the army or the air force or the navy. It's run by outside agencies who couldn't give a tinker's cuss about the state of the soldier or the RAF man or the navy man. And they don't. Some of the quarters you occupy are just not looked after properly. In the days of what they call the barracky bill, the barrack accounting officer, BIA, barrack inventory accountant holder, they were looked after. Houses were looked after properly. Windows were replaced, doors were replaced, central heating was put in, blah, 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 blah. Now, the service you're in now, unless you're completely self-accounting, would be a terrible place to be in, I think, because you're no longer being looked after properly. I don't think you are anyway.
You know this firsthand because you saw it change.
Yeah.
So if you were in, you'd probably be nostalgic for the earlier, for an earlier time.
Yes.
But what I find amazing is that, and I know that we started on the aid and stuff, but that all these years later, because the fact that this guy was there at the same time as you were, and he was that's an amazing story. Did that make big headlines back in England? Those soldiers getting killed?
No. At the time, yes, but in the Times newspaper, shortly before we decided to have this talk, they wrote about the infantry soldiers, and Nick Beard, this colleague of mine, got so irate that he wrote a letter to the Times to say, look, get your history right. 8 RCT soldiers died 2 days before these people died.
Oh, okay.
So, and you haven't even recorded the fact. That was the beginning of the Asian Revolution.
Did you think that? Oh, so this letter was back in the back then.
This was a letter
To the
looking
Times.
back over 50 years.
Oh,
if you like,
okay.
about the events in Aden.
And that the RCT was being
and they were
cheapened.
talking about the infantry, not the RCT.
Do you think that's the case a lot of the times? Because
Yes,
people,
yes.
And that's why I'd mentioned to you, in my research and the stuff that I've done, where I've really
There's always the other side of the story.
there's another side of the story, but there's also so many dimensions, and not like I wrote about a famous actor who, by the time that he passed away, like he had given people all of these impressions of his war story, and it just wasn't true. And I found this out via Army records, and they keep morning reports every day.
Oh,
it's like
yes,
temporary
the world
duty.
the world is full of liars.
Like all of a sudden, someone's storming the beaches of Normandy when you're just a replacement 10 days later, and people